Okay, so this week's topic on the 2020 highlights of the podcast interview episode series is really close to home, really close to heart. I retired from what I thought my career path was, which was professional snowboarding. That was my goal, to go to the Olympics, and I retired just short of that from the national team in 2015, and I was 21 years of age, and it was a big thing for me. Like, this is my whole life, was to become a professional athlete. This was my path, and all of a sudden I am now on a new path, and I'm rediscovering and finding a new career path, a new thing to do, a new thing to spend basically every waking hour thinking about and doing. And so I want to talk about this subject because it was a really difficult time for me, because my identity was stuck in being an athlete. That's when it really sent me into having more anxiety, experiencing depression. And I mean, those things were important for me then, going and self-discovering and figuring things out, figuring out why I did things wrong and why I was experiencing some of these things. But it's also interesting that, you know, even physiologically, you change when you've been so used to a certain routine, and now it changes. And so I think this year of 2020 has been such a year of change for a lot of people. And so I think this conversation is more relevant than ever. And so I'm really excited to share some of these highlights from the interviews in this new series. And we're going to be starting off with JJ Birden, who is a former NFL veteran, entrepreneur, and speaker. And he talks about life after sport. And he actually specifically, we're going to talk about preparing for life after sport. So I hope you guys enjoy this first clip.
The first thing I would say is get in your mindset that you start preparing for life after your sport when you are playing. When you're playing, that's when you prepare. You don't wait till the last year when the career's over. You start preparing now, because right now, athletes, when you're an active athlete, your credibility and your influence and your brand is so strong right now. Take advantage of that and spend time networking and meeting different people in different industries, and be active on social media. And I mean it from the standpoint is that social media gives us a platform to be able to establish new connections, build new relationships, and engage with others. And you want to build that up, because when your career is over, that could give you options, giving you different possibilities in the relationships you've established. So I would definitely say focus on planning for life after your career now. Be active on social media, network, get to connect with so many different people. And the other thing I would tell you is this, and this is what I always tell a lot of athletes. I say, find someone in your current sport who used to play your sport, who's retired, and who's gone on to do some pretty positive things, because they know what it's like to be where you are right now. And those veterans can give you some important information, because I made some mistakes, when my career was over. There's some things I wish I had not done, but I make sure I share those lessons I learned with these athletes today so they don't repeat them.
All right, so next up is a personal favorite clip of mine. It's with Justin Sua, the mental performance coach for the Tampa Bay Rays. His episode is the most popular episode of the All In with Natalie Allport podcast of this year, and I really enjoyed talking to him because he is an experienced mental performance coach and sports psychologist that he knows a ton when it comes to mindset, which is my favorite topic to dig into. And so he talks about pivoting and all the different things that he tries to do and tried to do, and it's cool because he raises his kids the same way, to just be okay with failing and trying and learning new things, and realizing that none of these things are failures, but they're just building blocks and guidance and experience to where you end up actually going. So I really love this conversation. Hope you get a lot out of it as well.
I'm not a quitter. I've learned how to pivot. And sometimes when you pivot, it's scary because you don't know where you're going to pivot to.
How do you know when it's, okay, this is just me not feeling it and I need to rely on my systems and push through? Or is it, something to do with mental health? Or is this just not serving me anymore? How do you differentiate between those things? Because they kind of come up as one thing.
That is the $1 million question. Right off the bat, I don't know. So however, what I do know is there are certain cookie crumbs and certain variables to consider. So first of all, one of the things when it comes to your why, when it comes to your goal, my question to you is, what does it do to you? Does it create something in you? Does it drive you? Does it move you to want to take action? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes, but if the answer is yes, you're going to see that it's going to literally drive what you do, how you think. It's going to affect how you sleep. It's going to affect the food you eat, the way you train, the people you hang around with, and it's very organic. Now, there are some people on this journey, they've been on the road for so long that that passion, that run through the wall mentality isn't there as much. It becomes just part of your professionalism, just part of what you do. It's not like it creates this visceral, kind of approach or influence on your body or on your mind. It just becomes part of your daily habit. You work out because that's what you do. You train because that's what you do. Now, what happens with a lot of people, they come to this point where it's like they wonder, should I keep going after this? Is this still the right dream, still the right goal for me? I honestly believe that it all comes down to that introspection, that self-awareness. Do you love it? And how much longer can you do this? And asking your friends and asking your loved ones, but ultimately asking yourself. There are a lot of people I know who have hit that little plateau area, and they're like, okay, let me figure this out. They either A, have to set a new goal in that same domain, B, reassess their why and their purpose, or C, understand that, hey, okay, everything's set, I still enjoy this, let me keep pushing through it. Hey, and what do you know it? They break through that plateau and they got it again. I've also met people who hit that same plateau, and when they pause to ask those same questions, they end up saying, you know what? I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go a different direction. This isn't for me. I'm going to go somewhere else. I don't know where it is. I don't know what it's going to lead to, but I know I don't love this as much anymore. I'm going to move on. And that journey and those questions is all up to that person. I personally experienced this in all of my life, my career. I was going to be a baseball player. That was it. I went all in on that. And so all of a sudden I realized that, hey, I don't love this as much. I don't know what I'm going to do, but hey, I know this isn't for me. In the meantime, let me go all in on broadcasting. Okay, I'm going to be a broadcaster. And then all of a sudden, nope, I'm going to be a teacher. Got to the point to where I kept going from place to place, but wherever I went, I closed the door on the other things and I went all in. To the point to where I got here. Now, here's where it's interesting. I can look back on my career and I think, wow, I'm a failed baseball player. I'm a failed teacher. I'm a failed broadcaster. But as I look back, I ended up realizing that the tools and the lessons I learned from each one of those parts of my life have helped me in what I do today. And so one day, I'll never forget, we're at the dinner table, and my son, when he was younger, he goes, Dad, I want to be a quitter like you when I grow up. I'm like, wait, what? He goes, yeah, I want to be a quitter. I was like, what do you mean Dad's a quitter? He goes, yeah, you've had all these different jobs. I was a baseball coach, a waiter. He goes, yeah, you're a quitter. I was like, okay, son, I put down the fork. Let me teach you what I ended up doing. I'm not a quitter. I've learned how to pivot. And sometimes when you pivot, it's scary because you don't know where you're going to pivot to. You don't know where you're going to go and how you're going to get there or what you're going to do, but you just know that where you currently are, it's not it for you. And it's that feeling you get in your heart and your mind, and you might try to be logic about it and use logic, but it just you can't answer that. You just don't know. And so it's just trial and error.
Yeah. No, I love that so much, because I think a lot of athletes, they put their past thing as like, this was a failure, or this was my past life, and let's move on to the next thing. And they don't realize all the skills that they learned there can be applicable to what they're doing now.
That was awesome, wasn't it? So next up, we're going to JT Barnett. JT is a former pro hockey player turned entrepreneur and wellness influencer. In this conversation, we talk about athlete and stability, and how being an athlete, you don't have that stability. And so then, you start craving it at some point in your life. And I think that's something a lot of people experience, especially as a teen in their 20s, and they want to adventure and do all these things. And not that ever has to end in any means, by any means, but there's a point where, just even biologically, you just want a little bit more of that stability.
Being done now, like not playing anymore, was a major adjustment for me. Was like everything from like just the routine that I had to like physiologically, like my body feeling like, well, I'm supposed to be like traveling more. Like I'm supposed to be on the road for game days and like on the bus. Like I'm supposed to be on planes, and just like being like trying to settle down and just be like, all right, I'm here now. This is what I'm doing. This is my new routine. Was like a big adjustment for me, and was like was a challenge, but was also like knowing like, okay, this is what I want now. Like I want to be a little bit more settled. Like I like the on the go stuff of like being able to travel with a team and like doing the whole like sports and road games and that kind of experience. But at the same time, I didn't like being on a team for like 7 months and then being in a different city the next year. I didn't like the ups and downs of like not knowing if I'm going to be on the same team the next year, or not having that kind of like safety of like, I'm in charge of like where I'm going to be. Because as an athlete, as you know, like you don't know,
Yeah.
even if you have a contract, you don't know, like, are you going to be in that city, or are you going to be, you could be traded, even though it could be beneficial for both teams. You could be traded and you have to pick up your life and move. So you just don't really know. There's no really like foundation of stability in that kind of world. So the adjustment of like being a regular person, not being a professional athlete anymore, is a major one that I think is like often overlooked and was a challenge for me. But now after going through that, I enjoyed both. Like I'm like, that life before was great. Really enjoyed that life. But now that I'm here, like this is what I want to do. I want to be in the same place for multiple years. I want to know I want to have a routine that I can kind of like ride out for a while. So there's pros and cons to both, but I'm grateful for it as well.
All right, so next up we have Charles Clarke, the former sixth fastest man on earth, to experiencing a quad chair, going to becoming a motivational speaker and entrepreneur. He is an amazing speaker, and here he's going to tell a story about his grandmother's sweet potato pie. When he told this story, I thought it was so well told, first off, just using that analogy and that story and how he remembered it. And so it really brought me through a whole journey of just listening to it, even in the moment, and just re-listening to it brings me right back in to that moment with him. And then hearing how he chats about the sweet potato pie and bringing your mess all together. You guys, you'll learn more when you listen or watch this. And I hope you'll really enjoy it and how he speaks about that. But just listen back to what Justin said, where everything builds on each other and all those things were not failures, but like important pieces of the puzzle. That's really what this clip is all about.
When you arrive to this special moment where you got to put everything together that you've been through, man, let me tell you, when you do that, a beautiful thing happens. Like, I remember, like, my grandma, she cooks, like, sweet potato pie. I don't know if they got sweet potato pie up in Canada.
So, yeah, it's not a huge thing in Canada, but I've heard about it.
Let me tell you, but I'm rubbing my chest thinking about this sweet potato pie. But, like, she was making the sweet potato pie on Thanksgiving, and she had the nutmeg, the sweet potatoes, and the milk and all of those things. And she started to just throw things in there, and she didn't use a measuring cup. And then she whipped it together, and then she dips her pinky in and she tasted it. And she said something was missing. I'm like, Grandma, how can something be missing? You add everything that you needed to this sweet potato pie. And she says, no, I need some salt. And so she grabs the salt and she adds a pinch of salt to the bowl, and then she stirs it up again. And she said, this is going to bring all the flavor together. And it was perfect. It was perfect. Wow. And so she didn't realize that taught me some valuable lesson in life. Is that your mess, your salt that you bring to the table is that thing that's going to bring everything together. So you cannot compartmentalize your life and try to complete new things. You got to bring everything that you've been through to this experience, because it's going to give you motivation. It's going to give you that drive. It's going to give you that zeal. It's going to give you that extra push that you need to excel. And it's going to even give you a perspective that nobody else has. But if you try to compartmentalize things, it ain't going to work.
I love listening to that story all over again. And so we're going to end things off lastly with a clip on JT, where he's going to talk about just even the transition from being an athlete to moving into the next stage of life, just physiologically. I think this is something that is not talked about at all. I've even just Googled for scientific studies on it, and there's a few, but it's just not like put out there as much in popular media or anything. People say, well, athletes have this routine, now they have to adjust, or they had a different lifestyle, they have to adjust. But physiologically, just with the chemicals in your brain and in your body, there's actually a lot more going on behind the scenes. And this is something that actually my therapist discussed with me when I was going through that, when I had just retired and was wondering why I was having, I was being more angry and upset and having these panic attacks and depression and all these different emotions and non-emotions happening. And a lot of these problems that were coming up in my life was because I had these chemicals and these things that my brain wasn't getting. It was so used to having an outlet every day of this action sport that was extreme adrenaline high, basically, and just not having that anymore. And so I really like this conversation because it was the first person who I've talked to who's like experienced some of that and thought about it in the same way. And he's someone who does like sauna, ice bath, all these things to trigger stress responses, to physiologically manage some of those things, which is definitely something I should be doing more of, and I'd love to dive in and talk more about. So hope you enjoy it.
Like you're getting hyped up for you, it's for a game. For me, it was like to send it off this big jump, and like your body gets used to those things, and all of a sudden you don't have it, and it's so hard. And like with no travel and all those things, like that's really difficult to overcome. Is there anything that you've done like physiologically, like with training or wellness or different things to help you with that?
Everything. And like
yeah.
literally like it is so overlooked, and like just the way that like, you know, your body becomes so used to things when you repeat them. It's the same way as like your body adjusting to pain, or like adjusting to like fear. It's like trying to push away something so that you can still perform in the way that you ideally want to. So like the routine of going through a game and going through travel for that and amping yourself up, and then having to amp yourself, or, you know, deregulate and like bring yourself back down after a game is something that like doesn't really translate well into regular life. Maybe in like business, you know, maybe in a little bit of business environments, but when you're just living everyday life, it's not that kind of battle that is like a, you know, a big game is. So if you try to take that same energy that you do into like a big game into like a normal conversation with somebody, it's not going to turn out the way that you want it to, or the way that you know, a healthy conversation would be. So for me, a lot of like the training that I do with like my wellness of like sauna, ice bath, whether I'm actually working out like with weights, yoga, even like meditation or breath work, like all of those things are just reworking like the way that my body adapts to stress and the way that my body works myself out of it. And that's like a major like shift in just the way that I feel and the way that I navigate things, because before I'm so used to getting ramped up that like I wouldn't ramp myself down because I didn't need to. Like I needed to stay up for so long to play this whole game. And then now in real life, it's like, okay, maybe there's like a stressful thing that happens here and there, but like you got to have more flexibility in your day-to-day life of like going up and then being like, okay, that moment's passed, like now let me chill out and like come back to the next task that I have to do in the day. And so all of the like training that I do, the sauna and all the stuff I just listed, is all helping me do that.
So I hope if you're an athlete and you're just worried about that upcoming transition that might be happening, I mean, for every athlete, it happens at some point in your career, or whether you're someone who's gone through it and hopefully you're related to some of this, or just someone who is not even an athlete, you do other things, you're going through other transitions, or you experienced other transitions. I hope you could relate to this and get some good takeaways.